Hello, I'm Senior Airman Pacenski of the United States Air Force. I've just completed ALS training and I would essentially be a Staff Sergeant Select, and my projection for so-on date is in June of 2019. The purpose of this brief is to inform you about Gunji Taiho Jutsu. The overview that I'm going to be using is a little bit of my background experience in combatives and martial arts, a history of Taiho Jutsu, and finally the contributions of what Gunji Taiho Jutsu will bring to military combatives. I would like to do this in a brief amount of time, but I'd like to thank you for listening and your attention throughout this video. As a senior airman in the Air Force at this time, I already hold credentials in the Modern Army Combatives Senior Instructor Level 2 and a Master Level Instructor of Air Force Combatives Program, Level 3. I was able to move through these curriculums and test successfully because of my background in martial arts, specifically in Jiu-Jitsu, Jiu-Jitsu from Brazil and from Japan. Also, I have a lot of experience as an educator and professor of Jiu-Jitsu. I have a master's degree from Concordia University of Southern California, Irvine, and I have high credentials in teaching Jiu-Jitsu and grappling arts for combatives or just the everyday practitioner, child, female, teenagers, and adults. I can teach the full range. Prior to my enlistment at 36, as a non-traditional airman, I was an executive on the Jiu-Jitsu Global Federation team and actually a co-founder with Master Rickson Gracie and Carlos Gama. I had been practicing the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu since 1995. And at the time, now it's 2013. Into 14, 15, I enlisted 2015. Okay, so this is a very unique position that I'm in, to be able to work with the different branches of the military that goes along with that full scope of knowledge, and then starting to make connections in the Air Force. When I first opened up my email through the portal and I was able to access my email, I had several emails from people that had reached out to me through the global from different bases around the world. Many of them officers in the Air Force, just congratulating me for enlisting and completing basic military training in my tech school, and offering that bridge of if I'm ever at their base, they would like to train with me in combatives. And then it would go on from there. I would start to train with the Army combatives, receive my certification, and then go to the Air Force Academy to get my certification in as a level 3 master instructor. Prior to the Army training and then the Air Force combatives, I was at MacDill and I worked on and completed a manual for combatives for the Air Force. And it was entitled Total Air Force Combatives, which focused on Taiho Jutsu techniques for apprehension, striking arts, grappling arts, and then weaponry arts. And the idea was that someone could use this manual to learn how to protect themselves as an airman. So having that in mind and then going to train with the Army, I got to see what their curriculum was all about. And then when I went to the Air Force Academy, I got to able to see what the Air Force was doing. And at that time, in 2018, the Air Force just completed and activated the AFI-4 specific Air Force Combatives Program. So now all the AFCs have access to this training, not just security forces. So this is the full range of my experience as a martial artist, as an instructor, as a teacher, and then now being in the military and having a different purpose. My training is different now. And of course, I took that experience, brought it back to MacDill, and started teaching Air Force combatives inside the SEER building, and teaching it to any of the different branches that were there at SETCOM, and then also anybody at TDY from different branches of the military, and just the respected group of airmen that were training. And with that 40 hours of training, you would get level 1 knowledge and a certificate. And if you completed level 2, that's additional 40 hours, that's a total of 80 hours. In October of this year, there's an invitation to have the level 3 master instructors all meet at the Air Force Academy. And it's there that we can take some suggestions on how to improve the curriculum, the techniques that are already there, and really come together as a team to build on this. I have already shot a video that I can send to the Air Force Academy and our team that works on one thing, just adding 3 techniques to the basic curriculum so they can make the techniques better. I shot the video in case I'm not able to PCS there or do a TDY or even a permissive TDY if I just miss it, as I am going to be doing cross training soon as an education and training specialist. So my goal is to plant the seeds of how to improve the techniques that we're already doing, and then of course to be there with the team and see what other suggestions are going to come out of it. My second objective is to work on the teaching methodologies of the program so that it can be better standardized. And then again, I'm going to be drawing from my experience as an educator, my experiences now at completing ALS, and just knowing how to teach combatives based off of what was taught in the Army and in the Air Force. But the goal is to standardize the teaching pedagogy and strategy so that other airmen can teach other airmen in a very effective manner, and they're certified to do it. In wherever they're at, wherever they're deployed, wherever the training is. The third goal that I would like to bring to the table and to help establish with the team is to have some sort of recognition for all of this experience and knowledge that's gained from training Air Force Combatives Program. And I like to think of it as the ribbons that you can earn as a marksman at basic military training. Within 1 hour, a trainee can effectively shoot a target and then earn a ribbon of marksmanship. To be able to hit that target as a marksman, an expert shooter, I would heavily weight that they had some background experience of going in. They had shot rifles with a hunting license, and then they were able to successfully shoot the target. And then some others are prodigies. They were able to hit the target many times and receive marksman. And then some of them, maybe the person to the left or to the right, hit the wrong target, and then they were given the marksman. That's the scope I would think that they earned the ribbon. And essentially they did earn it, and then on their uniform they have the ribbon that goes with it, the award. With Air Force Combatives, for someone to complete the 2 respective levels, that's over 80 hours of training. From that, they are going to improve their fitness levels, they're going to improve their leadership experience, their teaching experience as well, and they're going to have a skill set that they can use to protect themselves and someone else, and then also they're going to strengthen their warrior ethos, working as a team and just pushing through some difficult situations. The recognition that they receive is a work bullet, something that they can add to their EPR in an enlisted evaluation or an officer's evaluation as well. And then there's hopefully a certificate that goes with it, that it has at that respective base, the officer that was in charge of the program signed off on it, and then the instructor signed off on the certificate. And that's good. I feel that's great, but I would really like to see some type of ribbon for their blues to be awarded to them for all of this experience that was gained, nurtured, and practiced, and then actually applied through a testing or a physical event. And the idea is, from the Air Force Combatives Program, is not to make tough airmen that can take a punch and be able to push through and have resilience. Those things are going to be a byproduct of the program. The idea of the program is to create better airmen and not have that culture of a fighting culture. You don't have to do combatives and hurt yourself or someone else in some type of contest. You could be evaluated in a safe way, challenge your thinking under stress, and overcome some tough situations, and then on the back end learn from it. And that's how the Air Force Combatives Program is presented these days. In the 1950s, it was presented as, let's make really tough judokas, people that can throw each other, have contests, and that doesn't build a program. That it starts off, it's exciting, but people start to disappear. In my opinion, that's what you're seeing now in the different military branches as well. where there are little fight clubs being established in contests, and that's not, in my opinion, in the long run, or the arc of building something is going to make it successful. It's building the team, having people come together to practice and have passion for combatives, and then have them being able to use it in their work centers, being off the mat, into their work centers, being able to think, being creative, how to have less stress, and have that connection to the health aspects and the pillars of themselves as an airman, their physical, mental, emotional, and social connections. All of that is in combatives. It's fostered there, it's developed, and it can be taught. And then also there's leadership skills. So I can go on and on for days on the value of combatives. I just would like to see it recognized in the Air Force with a ribbon if there's an AFI, and liking it to the idea of marksmanship. They're actually a marksman for themselves to help protect others with or without weapons. All right, next in this briefing, I would like to explore what is Taiho Jutsu, and then finally get into the ideas of Gunji Taiho Jutsu. Jiu-Jitsu is a Japanese word and art form, meaning the gentle technique to be able to yield over strength. And it's very easy to say that Jiu-Jitsu is about the smaller man overcoming the bigger person. That's marketing. There is a lot of truth to that, and there in the fundamental strategy of Jiu-Jitsu of softness overcoming hardness. But that's just on a technical level, where people can learn techniques to rely on leverage, weight distribution, pressure, connection, all these things. How to deflect, how to use the opponents of energy. These are all skills that can be developed in a martial arts or in a combative setting. And Jiu-Jitsu provides a perfect platform. But there has to be more than that. So out of Jiu-Jitsu came the art of judo by Dr. Joaro Kano. He was a Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and instructor, and he developed his own method of Jiu-Jitsu, which would go on to become from Jiu-Jitsu to Kano Jitsu to judo, the gentle way. And what Dr. Kano brought to tatami, or the mat, was the idea that it's not, judo or Jiu-Jitsu is more than just softness overcoming hardness. There has to be guiding principles that go with it. One of those principles is mutual benefit, mutual warfare. What are the benefits that both of us can bring to the mat to help each other? How can this person work with me, how can I help them, and how can they work well with me so we can help each other? So in a practice of judo or in combatives, we throw each other down. I need that training partner to help me throw them, or have me test myself against them, and the same for them. If I don't have a training partner, I can't develop myself. So it's the idea of how can we cooperate with each other, how can we work together to have a mutual benefit. Another principle that was revolutionary to Jiu-Jitsu at the time, which would become part of what is now judo, is maximum efficiency with minimum effort. Maximum efficiency not only has to be how you do something physically, how you can use better angles, better leverage to use that in a martial arts context. It's also how you use your mind in your work center or with someone in a social situation, how to solve problems. How can we make this much better than before and maximize what we're doing with the minimum effort? So it's a mental and physical philosophy of these two principles. So if you accompany the softness overcoming hardness aspect of your technique, which is great, where you can be a strong person, you can develop your strength, you can do jiu-jitsu and judo for the rest of your life just practicing that concept. And then you add maximum efficiency, minimum effort as a principle that guides all of your techniques. And then lastly, how can I use this knowledge outside the tatami, the mutual warfare, mutual benefit? You're going to be able to be a better person in your workplace, and then hopefully go from the mat to helping your work, your everyday experience off the mat. And then lastly, which is the higher aspect, is how do you help the world? How do you help society with what you're doing? What is the purpose in your everyday life that's moving towards this? So the mission is to learn the combatives, use these principles, and then apply them towards that vision. You would like to be up here with your skill set and just down here at, I know how to do a throw. I know how to do an arm lock. I can punch somebody. I know how to defend. That's a low level of comprehension or a taxonomy of knowledge. It's very base, and yet many people stay here. They want to be tough. They want to be able to beat people up. They want to have confidence in their rank and all these other things. But that's the base level. Now, Taiho Jutsu is originally from Japan, and that was developed with Jiu-Jitsu schools and judo schools in the 1950s in Japan. The idea was the police department wanted techniques that they could use to apprehend suspects against the guns, the knives, different holds, how to put somebody on their face and apprehend them. The problem is, until 1993, with the advent of the sport of mixed martial arts, the Ultimate Fighting Championships, no one really knew what martial arts were the best for fighting, actual training. You know, the methods were katas. You know, the person grabs you, you do the technique. There's no resistance. It's just, it is what it is. And there's a room and there's a place and there's a time for having techniques presented to you this way and have the teaching methodology to have people learn form and structure. But there's another time to add resistance. Dr. Kano did this with judo. Jiu-Jitsu from Japan at the time before judo was taught in kata for safety, for form, for application, to hold back secrets. It goes on and on and on. Dr. Kano developed the idea of free sparring, which is randori in Japanese. Randori, along with curriculum changes, such as taking out finger bending, eye gouging, punching to the groin, techniques that you really can't practice at full energy, he said, let's revise the curriculum. So we'll add like arm locks where someone can resist. Let's keep the chokehold so that someone can resist and then learn how to tap out. And the person that's applying it, they can evolve their technique to see what's working. That's what happens in randori. It's a high-level skill set of drilling. Instead of drilling a move without resistance, now we can drill a move with resistance. And a byproduct of this is we're going to actually start to see what's working, what's not working, and evolve our technique so we can go back and say, I need to do it like this. The randori that was developed, and also the belt structure, so now we can have big beginners work with beginners and advanced students work with advanced students. It's not all one. So curriculum changes, technique changes, and then this idea of a training method arrived in Brazil in the turn of the century, 1920, 1925. And the Gracie family was exposed to judo and jiu-jitsu. At the time, it was kind of interchangeable with the name. And the Gracie family used what they learned and developed in their culture, their methodologies of jiu-jitsu. And then that would go on to the United States with 1993, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. You know, we're here today because of all of these contributions of jiu-jitsu. Today, the Air Force Combatives, military combatives in the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, they all have at their base aspects of jiu-jitsu, judo, and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Then they also have boxing and wrestling and different weaponry arts. And they could go even further. The Marines have a much more eclectic program where they're incorporating aspects of the Filipino martial arts, etc. But at the base, all of the systems are held together with Jiu-Jitsu. That's why I was able to move quickly through the Army Combatives and the Air Force Combatives because of my 25 plus years of training since 1995. So let's discuss what is wrong with Taiho Jutsu as it's taught in Europe and a little bit in the United States. It's not a common phrase or curriculum that's taught in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academies along in the United States. If I were to say to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, an American, I'd say, please show me some Taiho Jutsu techniques. He or she would look at me in amazing, well, what do you mean? Like what you do with law enforcement? I said, okay, yeah, let's call it that. What you teach the police officers, because that's a different skill set. You're not teaching someone that wants to fight in a cage. You're not teaching the general public, but you're teaching law enforcement jiu-jitsu techniques. And some of them are going to say, I don't have techniques for them. I just teach them jiu-jitsu. The law enforcement, they just come in and train with the general public. And then there are some instructors that have their approach to defensive tactics, law enforcement training using jiu-jitsu. And everybody, in their opinion, is the best at it, or they feel they have the best techniques. And there's value in that. And then there's not a lot of value in that. It's almost like a negative thing because they're not open to other ideas. But if we look at and explore Taiho Jutsu techniques, how to escort someone, how to use different locks, it's very difficult. Again, they go back to let's learn these techniques in Jiu-Jitsu as a kata. They don't have it with resistance. What if the person's resistance? They start off being passive aggressive to then they go full resistance. I have generations of instructors that say, I learned Taiho Jutsu from Japan and Europe, or that those masters came to the United States in the 80s and I learned those techniques, but to tell you the truth, those instructors couldn't even pull off the moves themselves. And before that person could finish their comment or their email or their explanation to me, I already knew that. I knew that they weren't going to be able to perform these techniques with real stress. Much like the Gracie family exposed a lot of the martial arts in the United States. It says, okay, let's see if it works. Come on the mat with me and we'll do the challenge to see if there's full resistance. Everything comes down to training methodologies. Yes, it is the person that brings their attributes and their personality to the art, but when you're practicing the art, you need to have well-developed training methodologies to overcome resistance. And that's where my brain and my mind was firing. It's like, okay, there are certain skill sets that are considered Taiho Jutsu, but the moment that you add resistance, those techniques are the right moves at the wrong time, so they're the wrong moves. Just my experience in Jiu-Jitsu, I know when is the right time to do an arm lock on the ground. I know when it's the right time to do a strangle or to pin someone or to know when to punch someone. Because the right move at the right time is the right move. You have to have it all. You have to have methodologies and strategies and almost a systematic approach to beat people to positions so that you can be effective. Or the window of your opportunity to do something is greater than I lost my window. Or I never practiced, what if the person does this? What if they just tighten up? So if you did a research on Taiho Jutsu techniques, you'll start to see certain positions that are similar from this manual, from this school of thought. And the missing ingredient is none of them practice Taiho Jiu-Jitsu with resistance. Now the solution. Gunshin Taiho Jutsu. This is the third aspect of my briefing. Gunshin Taiho Jutsu would essentially translate to military arrest technique, or in the military we would say Gunshin, military, Taiho, apprehension, body control, and then Jitsu is technique. This is the curriculum that I want to build on from my manuals that I've written for the Air Force, the Total Air Force Combatives, that I wrote before I even practiced with the Army or in the Navy. Just, I had time at MacDill Air Force Base to write a manual. And that book, which is broken into, once again, Taiho Jutsu techniques, striking arts, grappling arts, and then weaponry arts, it ends with security forces. How to have two people pin another airman on the ground or some type of assailant. Now, because of my training methodologies have changed, because I was overcoming some soreness in my leg, I changed my stance. This forced me to put my left leg forward and keep my right leg back. So I was in a lefty stance. I did this for my judo training, I did this for my jiu-jitsu training, but more importantly, it allowed for me to have my weapon side leg in the back position. So if I had a leg holster with my gun, I am now performing techniques in the proper stance, either in the interview stance or if I had to defend myself. The beautiful thing about martial arts is understanding distance. You know, if you're here and this person's here, they're not going to be able to hurt you. But as you both get closer, there are certain phases of what could happen and then certain ways that this person could kick you, they could punch you, or you can start grappling and then end up on the ground. So distance management is a very important skill set to learn in martial arts. The interesting aspect of being in law enforcement or security forces is that you have a weapon and you need to approach someone and have a unique distance, which is unique to security forces. It's not in a kicking range, it's not in a punching range, and it's not in a trapping range or a grappling range. You're kind of out here and you're monitoring that person. One of my interesting contributions that I've added to help make Taiho Jutsu effective is a strategy that I call PCSing. Now, I want you to know that PCSing is not permanent change of duty station, as we hear in the military, and as we know, and some of us look forward to our PCSing, or others get a lot of stress at it. And when you have the arc of your military career, you're going to PCS several times, moving from one duty station to the other. And when I had the conversation recently with security forces, they said, we're not taught how to, if someone's not going to be compliant with our words, we're not taught to use our hands to put them down on the ground and practice that. A lot of our time is spent just baton training and handcuffing techniques. And the combatives that we do practice, it's not that long. I mean, we do some of those jiu-jitsu moves on the ground and, you know, the arm locks and things like that. So the training that's provided to them is not enough, or if it was enough, there are not a lot of training methodologies for resistance in that particular skill set of how do you take a person to the ground with resistance or without resistance. So I developed the concept of PCSing. And I would like to explain what PCSing is. If you're going to approach a suspect as a law enforcement or as a defender in the Air Force, you need to be able to close a distance and put that person on their face with their arms behind their back. You need to be able to do that with your words or with your words in conjunction with your physical actions and your mental strategies. So you're gonna, in my opinion, to be able to do that, you need to do at least 3 PCSs. You're gonna do the first phase, which is PCS number 1. When you approach someone or they approach you as a defender, your first P is your proximity. That's extremely important. The way that you have your presence when you approach someone, you are already commanding competency. That person should respect your authority, your badge, your positional power, or they're not. So the first P is for proximity. C is going to be your compliance. By using your words, is this person going to be compliant? Are they going to start behaving in that they're being compliant to your presence and or your words, and then your positioning. Next, after you have your proximity and your competency, like the person's being compliant, you need to be looking at their stance. If it's bladed left or right, or what they're doing with their hands, you're going to take that all in this interview stage, where you're interviewing that person, that assailant. And this is where you can practice your OODA loop and your Colonel John Boyd cycle to help beat them to their OODA loop and have the best reaction. So there is an aspect of the OODA loop cycle in the first PCS that all of this can be trained, and that's the start. Next, this leads into the idea that, like that airman said to me in ALS, they're not taught to physically grab someone and put them on the ground. They're not taught the second PCS, which is now your position, your control, how you're controlling that suspect, and then your systematic approach in these positions. And when you have systems, these are things that you can practice in the different reference points. So now it's your position, your control, and then the system that you're using. You are only going to be on the outside of that person's position, the inside position, the split position, or maybe in the back position. It's the blind side. Okay, so if I put my hands out here, and I've written a whole book called the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, the side theory of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And what I was expressing in that idea on that theory and my overall thesis is, you are going to be more powerful, you're going to have more leverage if you're able to get past their arms and just get right outside their pinky to this outside position. If you can get to someone's outside position, you're taking their back, you have a lot of angles and leverage to overcome someone. If you're in the inside position, this is when the person is the most strongest against you. You can do technique, you can have distance, you can be close, you can be far, you can off balance someone's position, but you're going to have more of a challenge when you're inside here, in this inside position. The split is when you're on the inside and the outside. This is still challenging because the person can stop you from getting to the outside. But if you want someone to put their arms behind their back and you're reaching them, you're going to address it from the outside position. And that's what you need to do. You need to be able to behave and perform under stress in the second PCS with a systematic approach on how to behave in each part of these ranges, distances, or positions. Your last PCS, which is your third PCS, is are you able to pin the assailant, the airman, or the person on their face, putting them on their stomach. Next, are you able to communicate with them while you're doing this? So it's C, communication. And then lastly, are you safe? And is the person that you're working with safe? And lastly, is that person that you're pinning safe? That's the three aspects of PCSing as used in the Gunji Taiho Jutsu curriculum. Now, to be able to do this, everything has to rely on your weapon side leg, how to protect your weapon, and then also how to use other weapons, such as a baton. And we have different techniques in the curriculums for that as well. But this Gunji Taiho Jutsu, if you put all of the curriculums together, there's a strategic ranking system. There's a strategy and structure for instructors, which is essentially based off of the Air Force Combatives levels 1, level 2, and level 3. A basic instructor, a senior instructor, and the master level instructor. If you only learned the curriculum of Gunji Taiho Jutsu, you would have basic knowledge and application of striking combatives, grappling combatives, and weaponry art combatives. Very similar to what you would receive in Air Force Combatives or Army Combatives or the Marines or the Navy. But if you already had this knowledge in the Air Force Combatives and the different military branch combatives, you could learn other aspects of Gunji Taiho Jutsu and learn how to PCS, learn how to do these drills, learn how to use these techniques to your favor so that you can have the goal of not submitting someone, of not hurting somebody with a punch, but how to communicate and physically communicate, putting someone on their face and pinning them so that you can make the apprehension. That's the contribution of Gunji Taiho Jutsu. My purpose today was to inform you about this curriculum, this art, I would say now. Where it's going to be going is how much I can contribute and replace myself in the different bases that I'm at and have people learn this Gunji techniques. And the overview that I looked at was my background in martial arts, being very skilled in martial arts of Jiu-Jitsu and judo and combatives. And then I looked at my education experience as a teacher and professor of martial arts and actually in schools, my background and my degree as a master's level teacher credential from Concordia University of Southern California, Irvine. And then I looked at my experience teaching martial arts for over a 25-year period before enlistment. Then I got into philosophies of where and when Taiho Jutsu was developed in Japan, where it was coming from, and I gave an arc of what is Jiu-Jitsu, what is judo, and then what is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and how that affected the training methods around the world in the 90s, and how those techniques today are taught in the military branches of the United States Air Force, Marines, Navy, and the Army. And then lastly, of that aspect of the brief, I showed and expressed how Taiho Jutsu is not taught with resistance. And if it is taught with resistance, very, very limited on old school approaches to training. And old school approaches that are not revised with resistance training. That's taught from, I would say there's nothing wrong with the old school method, but if it's only taught in kata, it has to have that element of resistance, which you would find in randori or free sparring, to help you evolve your technique to see what is working and what is not. And then lastly, I introduced the ideas of Gunji Taiho Jutsu and how these curriculums can be added to any branch of the military's combative program or taught in isolation. And the goal is to learn how to apprehend someone with techniques and strategies that can bring someone to their ground on their face and be able to pin them and be able to perform Taiho Jutsu techniques with resistance and understanding key concepts such as PCSing and learning how to add this to your skill sets. I feel I've done this in my briefing, and I want to leave it with the idea that I am the current highest ranking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in the United States Armed Forces. When people make jokes and say, oh, you're a badass, you must be a badass, let me see your ears, things like that. I take that extremely serious. And I always say, hey, I've been doing this since I was 15 years old and I'm 40 years old. And I'm trying to just be in shape these days. But when it comes to teaching combatives to the Air Force, I take that extremely, like at the highest level of my training. There is no person more that I would want to teach and use these techniques for, like to pass it on, than someone that's in the military and would like to learn this. And the outside, on the civilians, they do that for any reason. They want to do it for social reasons, physical fitness, learning how to do this skill set. They want to have medals. But with military, there's not a lot of time. And they want to learn how to use techniques to protect themselves and their family. That, to me, is the real thing. And my goal is to see Air Force combatives taught and standardized throughout the branch, and then eventually be awarded like a marksman for this, being able to be assessed for all the hours that you put in to complete this program. And I feel that I can contribute to these goals that are laid out today. I look forward to my next PCS, my new change of duty station, and any of the experiences that I can develop. This mat that I'm on right now is a concept that I developed called Tatami Air. And the idea was I was sitting on a KC-135 and the airmen I was working with received a phone call and they said, go get your stuff, you're heading to England within 24 hours. And I was thinking, oh my God, I haven't been able to train in 2 weeks It's very difficult to find the mats on base. It's hard to get off base to train. I need to have my mat again. I've always had a mat where I could train martial arts. And I said, well, if I PCS or if I have to do a TDY or if I'm deployed, I don't know if there's going to be a mat. I got to be able to bring it with me. And I figured the mats that are out here in our industry, there's rolling kinds, there's puzzle mats, there's the big folding mats that tape down with mat tape and Velcro. And I said to myself, well, you need a 10 by 10 space to make this effective. You can't train something smaller than that. You need to be able to move. So 10 by 10 space would be good. How could this happen? How could you do this? And the only way I could figure is if I had somehow some type of air mattress where I could fold it into a bag and then carry it with me. And then you start to research air mattresses, and that's not going to work because the inside cannot only be filled with air. You have to change the levels of pressure, the pounds per square inch. So there has to be something else. So inside this tatami air is not just air. There's different technologies and threads that make it work. Now I'm able to carry this in a backpack or a backpack with wheels to any part of the world that I want and be able to blow this up with a hand pump or an electrical pump. The stiffness that I want. So for striking art, you want a harder surface. For grappling art, you want a little bit of a softer surface, and in between, sometimes you get a hybrid. I'm able to control that. The idea for me was not to take this concept and make money commercially, because that's not my job. My job is an airman in the United States Air Force. But when I'm going to train on duty or off duty hours, I want to be able to train on a comfortable surface to help protect myself and my training partner. And I want to be able to use this and travel with it. So my thinking of providing a service and a skill set to teach to airmen comes from the mat that we train on, to the knowledge that we're going to be using, how it's going to be taught, and how it can be recognized and standardized throughout the United States Air Force. And then specifically, how we can teach airmen that are defenders how to safely take someone to the ground and train with resistance apprehension techniques. Thank you.
It shows that